Hey guys, Kenny Wisdom here for On the Bubble, and today we're going to take a look at the X and Y set. It's a new set coming out. I think the pre-releases started last week, so I think the set actually comes out this week or next. Not really sure how that works, but it's the first set in the XY block, and it has some really interesting cards. So today we're going to use PokemonCards.com, and we're going to go through the scans, talk about some cards. Gonna try and keep it somewhat brief, but I do want to go over a fair amount of cards because I think there's a lot of interesting cards in this set. So kicking it off right here, we have Venusaur EX. You can read the stats on the screen. I'm not too big of a fan of this guy, in all honesty. Um, the energy to damage ratio is not quite there. The typing isn't the best, and the effects on the attacks are also not super great. I don't think this card is all that worth talking about, but the interesting thing that does lead into this is Mega EXs. So, as you can see, you can Mega Evolve by putting a Mega Venusaur EX on top of a normal Venusaur EX, and when you do that, it ends your turn. We still don't know if you can Mega Evolve on the first turn. I assume that'll come out. I assume that's in the FAQ somewhere, but excuse me, I'm not sure that's been talked about yet. I assume that you can't, and for the purposes of this article, or the purpose of this video, we'll assume that you also can't. So this guy's big. 230 HP is bigger than anything we've seen before, as far as I know. I could be wrong, but I don't think we've ever actually seen printed on a card 230 HP. And then we can see for 4, Crisis Vine 120, your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed and poisoned. So 4 for 120 isn't exactly the strongest attack we've seen in the current format. Black Kyurem can do 200 for 4. Obviously, there's other effects there. You know, just like the X with G Booster can do 200 for 3. But the interesting thing about Crisis Vine is its ability to paralyze. Now, paralyze is the strongest status condition in the game, objectively, making it so that the Pokemon that is paralyzed cannot retreat or attack. And we don't often see auto paralyzation. Usually it's something that has some kind of requirement on a coin flip or whatever it may be. However, we do see that this card does allow auto paralyzation, and it's an expensive attack cost, and it's not the best damage output, as we said, but I do think this card could see some play, especially given it's a Mega EX with 230 HP. It may just be that the attack cost isn't too relevant because your HP is so much higher than anyone else's, you have so much time. So, I'm not saying this card's going to break the format or anything, but I do certainly think it's interesting. Moving on, I'm not going to go over actual every card in the set. That would take way too long, but we're going to be looking at some of them. Speedrill has really cute art, like that. Sam Chen's favorite Pokemon, my good friend Sam Chen. Ledian, I'm sure he'll be happy about that. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, Chestnut. So, Chestnut evolves from Chespin, that is the X and Y grass starter from this generation. And as you can see, it's a stage 2, 160 HP, 4 retreat with an ability called Spiky Shield, which is essentially a Rocky Helmet. I don't think this card is going to be all that great. We just talked about how 4 for 120 with a special effect might not even be the best, so now here we have 4 for 90. And even if you want to say that it's 120 because of the Spiky Shield, that's not always how it's going to work. And even then, again, 4 for 120 isn't where you want to be, especially when you're on a stage 2. Most of the grass decks that have been doing well right now are focused on Virizion and Genesect, so quick, efficient attackers, and I don't see this card being very good right now. I could see in the future, don't want to talk about the future too much in the set review, because I want to focus on the now, but I think this card is an interesting enough card that we could see something where there's other cards that come out, maybe a Pokemon tool or something else that can protect it a little bit more, give it more HP, or allow its attacks to do a little bit more damage, or just something to kind of make it more of a force. It's definitely a flavorful card. The idea is that Chestnut's like a big tank, and not only does it heal and it's slow, but then it hurts your opponent when you attack it. Like it makes a lot of sense as a card, and I don't think it's super playable right now, but I don't think it's the worst card in the set by any means. I didn't even know this was a Pokemon, but that's cute. One cool thing about Pavilion, the card's not playable, I don't think. It has a Ho-Oh EX-like attack without Ho-Oh EX's ability, which is the whole reason that Ho-Oh EX is good. But um, in the game, there's like a bunch of different kinds. Like I guess depending on where you register your game, like where your game's like internal GPS picks you up at, it like changes which pavilions you can get. And they've also like done that in the cards. We're not sure how many patterns there are, but there are some amount of them. I think there's like 2 or 3 that have been confirmed. I think there's like 14 or 13 total in the game. So I thought that was really cool. It's something for collectors to care about. And you know, if the card was good, like I know that someone like me would be focused on getting the nicest pattern and all that. And it's just a cool little flavorful thing for people who like the video game. Moving on. So it's all the grass Pokemon look like they're worth caring about, and then we move on to Delphox. So again, excuse me, I have a little cold. I hope that's not picking up too much on the mic, but if so, I apologize. We have Delphox, whose ability is the same as Magnezone Prime's Magnetic Draw ability, where if you have less than 6 cards in your hand, you draw until you have 6. And then its attack is a fire version of Keldeo EX's attack Secret Sword, where it does 50 damage plus 20 more for each fire energy. It has just one. So, I really like this card. I think that its home right now is probably a Emboar Rayquaza deck that can cut down on the number of tropical beaches it runs in order to play this card. So, we did On the Bubble live show that you can catch at twitch.tv/onthebubble every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific time. Sorry, 7 p.m. Pacific time. We did this, and we heard about this card, and someone in the chat asked if you could play it in the Rayquaza Emboar deck without beaches. And I don't think that's exactly true because I still think the Tropical Beach is such a powerful effect on turn 1. But I think you can definitely cut down to fewer than the 3 or 4 that some decks are running, cut down to 1 or 2. And then with the idea being that you only need beach on the first couple of turns because after that you have Delphox. So you can go like maybe a 4 Skyla, 2 beach, Skyla on turn 1 for it, and then turn 2 or 3 get out Delphox. Obviously, the idea doesn't quite execute itself like that because you also have Emboar, and so all of your search cards and all of your rare candies are going to be focused on that, trying to get out the Emboar that really matters. But I definitely could see Delphox seeing some play. I would probably try a 101 or maybe a 202 line in most of my decks. The attack is very relevant. I mean, if you think about the fact that Blastoise and Emboar decks played Electrode, that only drew up to 4 cards, and this card draws 2 more and has a very relevant attack, all for being 1 more stage, so I think this card definitely has some potential. This card would be a lot better if it wasn't a stage 1 and could attach to anything. Even if it attached to itself, I think it would be playable. This card would also be a lot better if it wasn't if this attack did damage and it wasn't a stage 2. We move into Blastoise EX. I'm not a very big fan of this card. I know some people are, and I think it's probably the EX that's been the most talked about in like of possibly being playable. 3 for 120 and sniping 30 twice or sorry, that's not how it works. Is that how this one works? Yeah, okay, so all apologies. I don't think this card's very good, but some people do. I don't see it being played. I think all of the Blastoise decks, all of the water decks right now are again about quick Black Ballista 200s and not dealing with this. Same can be said about this card. I do think that this Hydro Bombard attack is a little bit better. And again, 220 HP. There's a card we haven't seen before, etc., etc. But again, I don't think I'm ever going to want to play this card in my Blastoise deck over a Keldeo EX or a Black Kyurem EX. And the weakness to water does hurt. Or sorry, the weakness to grass does hurt. It makes it so that a Genesect can do 100 damage, and then which becomes 200 because of weakness, and then a laser finishes it off, or a Deoxys would not finish it off, I suppose. So 220 HP is huge, it is relevant, but I'm still not sure this card is very good. Moving on. Also, keep in mind that this is my first time seeing some of these cards. I've kept up with the scans as they come out, but my philosophy about it is sort of just that I look at the cards when they come out, or when they're spoiled on websites and such, when they come out in Japan. I think they're cool and everything, but I don't really keep it in my mind what they do or what the future's going to look like. I think that if you're a competitive player right now, it's best to focus all of your energy on the current format and winning states or regionals or cities or whatever it is, and not necessarily thinking about how cool X deck is going to be when Y comes out, or what if how the meta will change when this comes out. I think that you have a limited amount of time to focus on Pokemon, and I think that you should use most of that time to be in the now. You'll have plenty of time to think about the other cards after they come out and after they're actually relevant. So, my favorite starter from Gen 6. And move on to our next relevant card, Greninja. Um, Greninja is actually a card that I have to say I'm not very high on. A lot of people seem to be into it. I think of the three starter stage twos, Delphox is definitely the one that people are into more. But I know that a fair amount of people have hyped Greninja, and I don't really see it. Water Shuriken is an interesting ability, allowing you to discard a water card from your hand and put 3 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. But I don't think a stage 2 that does 80 for 1, even if that 80 can be, obviously that 3 damage counters can be put anywhere, is really going to be great. Even though it's like a shred effect, it's not affected by weakness. I don't really see it. Again, weak to grass. I think this card is inherently powerful and could be good down the line, but in the current format, I don't. I think this card is too slow. However, if the format does slow down and stage twos are able to attack or able to be like the main attackers of decks, I think that this card will definitely be playable. It's very fast and explosive, but right now I just don't see it. Raichu is a card that we actually had a bit of a discussion about a couple months ago when it was first spoiled on OTB, and Electro Circuit is the kind of attack that we've seen be played. Like I remember some of the Stage 1 decks back in the 2011, 2012 season were playing the Minccino that did do the wave for 20 times the number of bench Pokemon. And this guy's very similar. He's a Stage 1, same energy cost, etc., etc. He can be searched by level ball. He has free retreat. And it does, he's a lightning type, so you will be knocking out things that are weak to lightning. Unfortunately, right now, I don't think there's too much that is, but again, if the format slows down, I could see this card being a real contender. 90 HP is probably too little, but there's things we can do about that with tool cards and such. I don't even know what this card does. If this Pokemon is your active Pokemon is knocked out by damage from the opponent's attack, flip a coin. If heads, put 5 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. Yeah, that's very interesting effect, and it's cool that it exists. It's cool that the whole Volt Torch and Electrodes blowing themselves up thing is still like a gimmick, but that can't 5 damage counters cannot be where you want to be when you're losing a Pokemon. Emogi EX again. Excuse me. I've talked about this before. If this card could attach, if this card could attach energy to other Pokemon, or if we could attack on the first turn, I think this card would be playable. But as it stands, I don't see it. You're gonna have to wait an entire turn. You're only attaching to it. We do have energy switch, but when you look at traditionally all of the other EXs that have very little HP, you look at a Mew EX. Well, Mew EX goes back into your deck after you attack with it because you use the ability to copy an Excelgor's attack. Jirachi EX. Jirachi EX provides a huge benefit being able to drop it and search a supporter card. It acts as another supporter essentially. Additionally, Shaman EX. If you want to look at that, Shaman EX, which hasn't even really saw that much play, has an extremely powerful late game ability. What I'm saying is that all of the EXs that have 110 HP around there usually have insanely good abilities, and I just don't think that you can risk playing Emolga right now with its low HP. Moving on. Here we go. So Trevenant. So this is a stage 1 that has the same ability as Gothitelle, meaning that while it's active, your opponent can't play Pokemon or can't play item cards from his or her hand. And then its attack does 60 and 20 damage to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. This is a really hyped card. I'm not sure how I feel about it. On one hand, I love Gothitelle and I love effects like that. When Vileplume was legal, I played Vileplume most of the time. I played Gothitelle quite a bit. I like control decks. I like Trainer Lock. I think it's healthy for the game. But and there's a big argument that it's Gothitelle was already a good deck. Now you made it faster. Why isn't it good? Well, or why wouldn't Trevenant be good? Well, I don't want to say that Trevenant's not good. I think that Trevenant is a very inherently powerful card and has some combinations I can see working. But as far as a traditional kind of Excelgor lock deck, like the one that won U.S. Nationals this year in the hands of Edmund Curris, or the one that Ian Whiten got third in the senior division with at the World Championships in Vancouver, I don't think that um, Trevenant is going to work out exactly the same because Virizion has such a big impact on the field now, and Virizion being able to shut down your deck entirely is going to be hard for you. Additionally, I think Darkrai is already a good deck, Darkrai Gabrador, or even just like a straight Darkrai. And now they have Yveltal EX, which is just another attacker versus you, which means that Trevenant is going to be knocked out so much easier. Um, Again, I'm glad this card is printed, and I could definitely be wrong. There's probably some kind of combo I'm not exploring. I know Mike Canadis is really into this deck, friend of the show, who just top aided the Florida Regional Championships in Orlando. But I'm not a big fan of it right now, and I would be very interested to see what people do with it coming into States. There's been some hype about this card, but I don't think that it's very good at all. Um, it's interesting and gimmicky, but Raticate was never a real deck, and this card is essentially strictly worse. So, um, OTB's own Jeremy Jowlin fought for this card when we were talking about it once because with a Bangle, it can knock out a Darkrai EX with Earthquake. I'm still not sure that it's the most efficient way to do so, but it's definitely interesting to keep in mind that 1 for 60 on a stage 1 can be relevant. I don't think it'll see much play, but just keep that in mind. I also would have assumed that Dugtrio would have a high retreat cost. Well, I guess it can just like go into the ground, right? Hmm. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Rhyhorn, Rhydon, Rhyperior. Scrolling down through the fighting types. Sableye. Oh, it just draws? Okay. I was hoping Sableye was better. I guess all the Sableyes have been pretty good during the last couple of years, so as for it all. Alright, so Yveltal. One thing, let me know in the comments that I'm mispronouncing this. I don't actually know. I assume it's Yveltal because it's supposed to be like evil and dark, but if I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments. This card, for 1 energy, has Oblivion Wing for 30, and it basically acts as a dark patch, but it does 30 damage and goes onto any of your Pokemon. So it's important thing to keep in mind is that it doesn't necessarily need to go on a dark Pokemon. You can put it on anything on your bench. I think this card's good. I'm not sure what its place is yet because 3 for 100 isn't super good, and the 1 for 30 is very good, but usually out of non-EX attackers, you want something that can kind of trump your opponent. You want a Terrakion that can knock out their Darkrai or their Thundurus. You want a Bouffalant that can put extreme amount of pressure on them. And not that Oblivion Wing isn't very good, but and not that I don't think it will be played. I'm just not sure in what counts it'll be played, and what kind of decks it'll be played, how many Dark Energy and attackers you need to justify it. I do think it'll have its place, but I'm just not sure where that is quite yet. Yveltal EX. This is I wouldn't say this is my favorite card in the set, but I would say that that's the most hyped card in the set, and probably the strongest card in the set, or at least the card in the set that'll have the strongest immediate impact. Evil Ball does 20 damage plus 20 more damage times the amount of energy attached to both active Pokemon. So, if you remember Mewtwo EX, when that card was first printed, it was very oppressive. Um, Especially in the big basics deck, which was a lot of the kind of decks around that time. If you didn't have Mewtwo's, or your opponent would win a Mewtwo war, that is, when 2 Mewtwo's are trading off KOs, if your opponent, like, whoever won the Mewtwo war would win the game. And there was a feature match that I had in Oregon state championship or regional state championship back in 2012 or 2011, whenever, no, 2012, when Mewtwo came out. And I was playing a big basics deck, I believe, and my opponent was playing some kind of other big basics deck that was like it was more like the cake deck, the Electro Cavalian deck, and we were playing, and I had I was winning. I had a little bit of an advantage on board, but he was slowly building up resources, and he was definitely going to make it a game. And then I realized that I knew who my opponent was. He had been a local player, and I didn't think he owned Mewtwo EXs. And I realized that if I was right, and he didn't own Mewtwo EXs, I could just win the game with a single Mewtwo. So my options now are I keep going, have the games going, and I have a little bit of a lead, but need to make sure that I draw better than him to maintain it. Or I put all my resources into a Mewtwo, be very aggressive, and if he has a Mewtwo, I am going to be way behind, but if he doesn't, I'm going to win the game. And after some deliberation, I decided to go all in on my Mewtwo, and he didn't own them, and he didn't play them, and he admitted to me that he didn't own them, which is what I thought because Mewtwo's were $70, $60 back then. Uh, and so a lot of the player bases didn't have them. And I was able to just X ball, X ball, X ball for the next couple of turns and win the game. And so the point of the story is that Eviltal and his attack Evil Ball is a strictly better version of that. Yes, it has to attack for Dark Energy, but with how good Dark is right now, that's not really too relevant. And that plus 20 damage is very important. Additionally, um, its stats are fine. It resists fighting, which is a big problem for the Dark decks. And even its second attack, Y Cyclone, does 90, which is not the best, but whatever, and it bounces energy around. So this card is very strong. It's obviously very pushed. They basically printed a strictly better version of Mewtwo EX that already fits into an existing archetype and fixes some of the problems that archetype has. So definitely look for this card to be played. I expect in all kinds of Darkrai builds. I expect Darkrai to see just as much play, if not more, than it did last season because of this. It's a very, very powerful card. I don't think Skarmory is a real card. Um, the only application that it really has is to fight against the Trubbish decks. Excuse me. And even in the Trubbish decks, the your opponent's active Pokemon usually is who has all of the tools on it, and your opponent can definitely play against it. Play around it. Excuse me. Additionally, I don't think the Trubbish decks are worth putting a pretty awful card in your deck for. So, moving on. So I have the two Aegislashers or Aegislash, and I'm really not sure what to think of these cards. I will say that I think that the card designs, if you haven't noticed from watching this review already, I think I'm a really big fan of game design and card design. And I do think the card designs are very cool. I do like how stance change works, but I'm not too sure that these cards are going to be too relevant. Um, the problem is that you have these cute abilities that are interesting, but then you can't really follow it up by doing anything that other decks can't do. And so your damage output is low, your energy isn't efficient, and you have cool abilities, but I'm just not sure that that's totally going to be enough. Now we move on to the fairy cards. These cards are gorgeous. The pink is great. I love fairy type. I'm a big fan of all of this kind of stuff. And I think this is the first, yeah. So Aromatisse. So as you can see, it has Fairy Transfer. I thought it was translated as Fairy Trans, but which allows you to move any fairy energy attached to one of your Pokemon to another one of your Pokemon. We've seen this on Klinklang, the black and white one allows you to move metal energy. We've seen it on Hydreigon that allows you to move dark energy, and now we see it on Aromatisse. So for those of you who know me and have followed my escapades in Pokemon, you know that I love this type of effect. I played Klinklang more so after the Plasma Klinklang came out, so all of your metal guys were protected from attacks. But I still played that card and I loved it. I also played Hydreigon. I love that. I love the ability to run multiple types of Pokemon and kind of play a toolbox type deck. I also love Ho-Oh EX decks, so this card definitely speaks to me and I like it. I think that it'll definitely have its place in a deck. Like I definitely think that there, to some extent, will be some kind of fairy trans deck. But what I think more than anything is that they will have Aromatisse as an efficient way to fairy trans and not so many fairy Pokemon. With Rainbow and Prism, I think you will still play some number of fairy energy, but I think that you're mainly going to be focused on just good attackers who can attack with either Rainbow or Prism and kind of use that to your advantage, because I think that actual fairy attackers are sort of lacking. One other thing that I could see is Aromatisse being played in other decks because it's such a small commitment with only being a stage 1. I could definitely see something happening where you play Aromatisse as a thin line in a deck where you just want to abuse max potions or something. I could definitely see something like that happening. That couldn't really happen with Hydreigon. Slurpluff, each of your Pokemon that has any fairy energy attached to it can't be affected by any special conditions. Um, Again, this card is kind of like Aromatisse, but the problem is that whereas Aromatisse is an easier to get out Hydreigon or Klinklang, Slurpuff is a Aromatisse is easier to get out, and Slurpuff is a harder to get out Virizion EX. And if there is a dedicated fairy deck or when fairies become very relevant and become good cards, I can see this card being good. But for now, again, I think you would probably just play Virizion EX with Rainbows, even if you were playing some kind of fairy deck. Xerneas. So I actually like this card. For 1 energy, you choose 2 of your bench Pokemon, and for each of those Pokemon, search your deck for a fairy energy card attached to that Pokemon. So it's very clear that Pokemon Card Laboratory is giving us the building blocks to build a fairy deck. Again, I don't think they're giving us very many good attackers to kind of really finish the game, but I like this card a lot. I think that when fairy attackers do come out, this card's going to be incredible, and I think that it is definitely something to be reckoned with. And I do see this card having application, so definitely keep it in mind. Xerneas EX. So for 3 energy, it does Breakthrough for 60 and 30 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, and then for 4, it does 140. All I can say about this card is I just don't see it. Again, I don't think the fairy has a good attacker, and I don't think this is what you're looking for. I really wish they would have pushed this card a little bit more, because I think fairies, if this card was a little bit better, I don't think fairies would be broken. I think they would actually just be like a good playable deck. So it's unfortunate to me that they didn't push this card just a little bit more, but I guess you can't have everything. This card isn't terrible by any means, but I just don't think that it's enough to really push its archetype. Moving into the colorless cards now. I'm not sure if there's too much here. Scrolling down. Bunnelby and Diggersby. Oh, this is a basic. I've seen a little bit about this card, but I don't really see it. It's cool and interesting. One thing that I could see this card eventually being good. Again, I'm sorry that I talked about the future so much. I wanted to focus more of this on the now, but I think a lot of these cards have interesting implications down the line. Is if 90 HP ever becomes stronger, I could see this card being played in kind of a truth kind of energy, kind of trainer lock / energy denial / knockout denial deck. So Reuniclus some damage off of this guy, heal it, discard their energy, just reduce the damage they're doing to you, and just kind of tank with this guy. Unfortunately, I think that maybe 120, 130 HP would be better to tank with than 90, but I could see a world where this card is actually very strong. Alright, so we're getting to the tail end here. Trainer Supporter Cassius. Shuffle one of your Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your deck. I see this card being good in a couple of different archetypes, mostly a kind of a plasma deck, where you're dedicating a lot of energy to the board, and like on a Snorlax or on a Kyurem or on a Lugia or something, and you need to heal it all and get energy back into your deck. I don't think that it has many applications outside of that immediately, but it is a cool effect that I really am interested to see what happens. Evo Soda is the card that's probably been most talked about, maybe most argued in the entire set. You can get the abilities there, and for those of you that might not understand it, it does not allow you to skip evolutions. You can't go Squirtle, Evo Soda, Blastoise. You can go Squirtle, Evo Soda, Wartortle. There aren't many applications for this card. The one biggest thing is that if Archeops ever gets big or anything else that cuts off evolution, this Evo Sodaing out a War Turtle onto your Squirtle is not actually really evolving it, and it'll get through that ability. But otherwise, there's almost always going to be a better search card that's not too narrow. Like this card can only search for things that you already have the lower stages of on board. So, um, A, if you want to search for basics, you can't do that. B, if you need a Blastoise, we don't have a Wartortle, you can't do that. I don't see the applications for this card yet, but I could see it as a one of in some lists um, that don't have a way to search out cards regardless. So that makes sense. They don't have if there's not a better way to search out their stage 2 than this, I could see it, but for now I'm not quite sure. Fairy Garden, each Pokemon that has any fairy energy attached to it has no retreat cost. Again, I think that this card could be very good if fairies are an archetype, but I think with Prism and Rainbow, you are not going to have to actually run many straight up fairy energy. You can instead run Darkrai and Rainbow or Prism, so they count as both. But this card is definitely something to look out for if straight up fairies becomes very, very good. Great Ball is unplayable. Hard Charm is Eviolite for all cards, not just basics. It's going to be a good card. I don't think it's at its best right now, but definitely Eviolite was already strong, and now that it applies to anything, it can definitely open up the possibilities for some more stage 2s or stage 1s to be good. Match Revive. With all the shuffle effects in the game right now, I don't think that that card's going to be too good. Durant is a card that we played in the Kling Klang deck that allows you to put any card on top of your deck and draw it. Or sorry, put any card on top of your deck and draw it next turn from your discard pile. And I think this card is almost strictly worse. This card has to get Pokemon sensitive items, of course, and I don't see it being too relevant. But it is cool as another effect to get things back into your deck. Muscle Band is Dark Claw for all Pokemon. Going to be played in a lot of things. I actually think that this card has bigger implications than what you will think. A Virizion with a Muscle Band knocks out Stabilize. Additionally, Virizion Muscle Band into Genesect's Megalocan is 100 with 170 total. With the Deoxys 110. I think this card has a lot of good implications, and I think it's very, very strong. Juniper is the best card the best supporter in the game, and Sycamore is a copy of that, so obviously going to be good. Professor's Letter is a strict upgrade from Energy Search, so of course it's going to be played. I think this card is going to Blasters and Emboar were already two of the best decks in the format, and I think that this card does not allow them to be better than everything else, but definitely allows them to keep up, and definitely is going to give them more options. Red card's really interesting. We talked about this one on OTB last week, and I don't think that it's very powerful, but I'm not sure that many decks have the slots for it in their deck. I'm not sure that many decks can run a card that just says negative card advantage. Your opponent shuffles and draws 4. Hopefully they don't draw anything. I think there might be a control deck that eventually does, but for right now, I'm not sure that I see it. Roller Skates. You don't want to be flipping coins to draw 3 cards. You can already draw a lot of cards off a bicycle or a Charin or lots of other supporters. Obviously, this card is a trainer, but still bicycle outclasses this card, and you never want to run a card that actually does nothing on a tails. This card's good, Shadow Circle, but unfortunately, I don't think you're going to be wanting to run this over Burbank or any of the other stadiums. You only have a few slots that you can really dedicate to stadiums, and so in a Dark Red deck, let's say you're weak to fighting, but A, Burbank City Gym is probably going to help you out more than this card, and B, fighting Pokemon aren't even like at the forefront of the metagame right now, and C, you just got Evil Taliax to deal with fighting Pokemon. So I could see this being played in decks that can run any type of energy, like decks that attack for colorless and have a problem with weakness. That's definitely a possibility, but I'm not sure what those decks are right now. I think Shadow is very powerful. I think that excuse me, Professor Oak's new theory was this card, except for you draw 6 cards, and That card was always very, very good. It was always a standard. And drawing one less card is obviously worse, but I think that it's still fine. Drawing four cards probably wouldn't be where you want to be, but I think drawing five is still just such a slight downgrade from what was a great supporter in Professor Oak's New Theory. So I think that card we definitely played in a lot of decks, and it's great to have another supporter. Super Potion I actually really like. All decks that attack for one energy can use it to their advantage. All decks like that have Fairy Trans or Dark Trans ability can use their advantage. I really like it, and I think it's going to open up the world for a lot more tank decks. Team Flare Grunt, unfortunately, is in a weird position design-wise where if it's a trainer item, it's just energy removal and is way too strong and should already be printed. And if it's a trainer supporter, it's just not playable. If there ever comes a time when there are energies that do a lot of things for you, I could see it, but for now, supporters just need to give you card advantage and not in the way that Team Flare Grunt gives you. Double class is also a staple. I think this is probably the worst art ever for it. I prefer Heart Gold Soul Silver art and base set art, but DCE is very powerful, and I'm glad to have it reprinted. Rainbow Energy is actually my favorite card in the entire set. I love this card. I think that it gives you more options for running more types of energy, running trans decks like Fairy Trans or Dark Trans, and I think this card is something that is very powerful, but also is never game breaking. It never shouldn't be printed, or it never like your opponent never hatches a rainbow and you just go crazy because they got so lucky to draw the rainbow. I love this card and I'm really glad to have it back. And with that, we finished the review. These are some beautiful art. I love art. It was beautiful. Two are both these two are both gorgeous. Thanks for watching. Hope I provided some insight. If there's any cards that I missed, feel free to let me know in the comments. And also, let me know in the comments what your favorite card in the set is and why. I'd really be interested to hear that. Hope you enjoyed the set review. Please check out TopCatCentral.com. The web store will be up soon. We can order some of these cards. Check out Facebook.com/OTBPokemon and give us a like. And thank you for watching. I love you. Good night.